Today marks the 6-month point since Gran Turismo 7's initial wide release on the 4th of March, and I believe now's as good a time as any, really, to take stock and reflect on how we think of the game so far. Positives, negatives, things we're glad they brought back, things we hope they do again, maybe things we hoped were gone, or things that we hope they don't do again. I want this video to kind of be a mini forum, using the comments to actually get into discussions with each other. Maybe people who agree with each other, people who disagree, people who may introduce you to an idea or a point or a way of thinking that you hadn't thought of before. Sometimes even a hater can give you a good idea. There have been times in the past here on the channel that people have made comments which were intended to be insults of my work, and I've just implemented what they said and done better, because it was a good idea. And that's probably the last thing a hater was expecting, but that's actually the truth. Sometimes a hater can refine the diamond. So there's nothing inherently wrong with criticising a game. And I think that's a state of mind which a lot of people need to snap out of, thinking that you can't criticise something that you love because it makes you a traitor somehow, or somehow less of a fan. No, I've always prided myself on simultaneously praising and criticising Gran Turismo, as I do with Forza and plenty of other games that I love, because I believe that's how you make things better. You don't rest on your laurels, you constantly try to improve, and you call out things that you don't believe are true to the franchise or to the style of gaming that game should be still going for, or maybe if it tries something new, something that doesn't feel true to the series. And that doesn't tend to happen as much in a racing franchise, but I think Gran Turismo is such a cultural phenomena that it kind of does apply here. For me, there's one point that I want to bring up, and the point that I want to discuss is, for me, the core of most of my issues with the game, and interestingly, most of both my positive and negative feelings toward it, because I want to highlight what I'm talking about by briefly talking about a different game. My favourite game of all time, something that has nothing to do with racing, something which I've played through probably 40 or 50 times, maybe more, and it's called Fallout 4. I absolutely adore that game. In that game, for those who haven't played it, there's an officially sanctioned modding section, and you can basically cheat the game, like an old cheat disc. You're not playing with other people, so it's only your own gameplay. So cheating is absolutely fine, and you can essentially play as Superman. Or you can play as Christian Bale from The Machinist, depending on how difficult you want to make it. So, with those two extremes in mind, you can boot up a new game, shovel these mods in there to really streamline the experience, make it as much like jangling keys in your face as you want, and then after a couple of hours, you'll pretty much be done with the game. Or you can play through it without any mods turned on, and if you really want to take your time and complete everything and go at a cool pace that really feels like you're exploring the world, then you can probably play 4, 5, 6 days worth, maybe even more out of the experience, and certainly more if you play on survival mode, which is kind of like the equivalent of turning off traction control, playing with a wheel and making it as much of a simulation as you can. What's my point? Well, my point is that sometimes making things easier doesn't make them better. You put mods on, you can crush the game in an hour, and then you'll be bored. Because there's nothing to it. There's quite literally nothing to it. There's no skill required. You're playing with cheats. To me, that is exactly how I view paying to win. And I believe that there's not a single game on the market that I've ever seen that should have microtransactions. I've not once ever heard, seen, or experienced any justification for that being something that needs to be in any game. Paying to win is something which I will never have any respect for. And I don't want it in my games. But it's not going to change because it's simply far too lucrative. I believe, to get back to how this ties into Gran Turismo, that the single biggest disappointment for me with Gran Turismo 7 is unfortunately something which they've learned absolutely nothing from Gran Turismo Sport's bad reception from a number of players, myself included. That is career mode. Or, in other words, a lack of career mode. The cafe in Gran Turismo 7 is not a career. It's a series of events that give you prizes. That a career does not make. The events on various circuits in the game do not constitute a career mode. In fact, if you represent those races pound for pound in an older Gran Turismo game, they would occupy less space than simply the manufacturer events alone in a game like Gran Turismo 4. And that wasn't even part of the main career. That was just a side hobby. If that's the entirety of the career, a career which, as many players can attest to, you can fully complete in Gran Turismo 7 in 2 or 3 hours, which unfortunately was pretty much what you could do in Gran Turismo 6 as well, which is where this problem started, as much as I still love that game. I think for me that is the biggest issue that I have with Gran Turismo 7. It's that for all of the effort that was clearly put into trying to give people things that they loved from the past, I mean, you don't put cars like the Suzuki Escudo in, you don't bring back Deep Forest and Trial Mountain if you're not trying to at least appeal to some of us in the community who do miss the good old days, if you will. So clearly they were trying to some degree, but it's almost like there's some kind of disconnect within Polyphony, wherein there are certain people with good ideas, and then there are other people with new age ideas, like esports, online all the time, microtransactions, in other words, the more corporate side. And there's some kind of either clash or just a complete lack of talking between those people, complete lack of communication, wherein the ideas aren't quite meshing. Because on the one hand, you do get some of those nice member berries, but then the core of the game itself becomes essentially a car collecting simulator, except you can just pay to buy the cars and be done with your bank account a lot lighter and your virtual garage a lot heavier. That's not Gran Turismo. That's top trumps with some racing. And although for some people that may be enough, for me it's actually very disappointing. I was honestly hoping that there would be more to the game than that. And even though of course I'm still going to produce content for it, because despite what the haters would love to hold over my head, yes, it is my job, or at least part of my job, so of course I'm going to continue doing content, because I'm not here for the good time, I'm here for a proper time, and a proper time covers the good and the bad. With all of that in mind, I believe that for me Gran Turismo 7 could have been so much more if it had a career mode that actually felt like effort had been put into it. In GT Sport, the career mode was a literal afterthought. In GT6, there was barely any career mode at all. If I recall correctly, you won like tokens or something. Think back for those of us who have been playing the franchise since the time when Gran Turismo actually was the king of the hill and nothing came close, which you simply can't say anymore. Well, in Gran Turismo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even, career modes were massive, and they felt, and this is the crucial thing for me, they felt lovingly crafted. It felt like every event, take my favourite of the franchise, Gran Turismo 4, every event felt like it actually meant something. You would win cars that you either couldn't afford, or that sometimes you couldn't buy, and sometimes that you couldn't even see. There were cars that weren't even in dealerships, actual secret cars. There were things like winning a car for getting all gold on licenses that were actually difficult to do. Not like these days where gold simply doesn't mean as much anymore. There were events that made rally feel like it meant something, which is not really something you can say about Gran Turismo at all since 6. 5 had some great rally implementation, 6 I don't recall putting any effort into that at all, and then 7, or Sport and 7, well, rally is a footnote in these games. Gran Turismo has changed. It's changed in its focus, it's changed in its scope, and Polyphony of course are at the helm of that. Now either of their own accord or because of corporate interests and, investor demands, whatever the case may be, they're clearly shifting more towards the online. That started with GT5, but it was just starting, so it didn't really affect the game that badly. GT6, it became notable that the game really started to swing toward the online, because the career mode suffered, because they didn't think they needed a career mode, because surely people just want to race with each other. Well, the reviews speak for themselves. A lot of people really don't like GT6, because there's honestly nothing much to it once you take the online aspect away, and I say that as a fan of the game. GT Sport without an online aspect is quite literally not even a game. At release there was no career mode and nothing to do without online racing. The entire purpose of the game was that. Now, you could even make the argument, yes, but sport was something different. That's why it was called something different. It was about the esports. It was supposed to be like this AC Competizione event, a different kind of game. Sure, even if I give you that point, which I also happen to not agree with, because it was the only game you could buy, not an alternative such as Forza Horizon is to Forza Motorsport, you cannot make that same acquiesce about GT7. Because GT7 is deliberately numbered, the trailers made deliberate allusions to the old school aspects of the series, and it really did look like GT4 or GT5 with current graphics, new physics, and a mix of legendary cars with the new stuff. That looks so good, and it's why I was looking forward to it. And there were many, including myself, that tried not to get overhyped, but of course we still hoped because we loved the franchise. But it has no soul, and I don't really know any other way of saying it than that. Gran Turismo 7 has so much potential, and to me that is actually more disappointing than GT Sport. Because with GT Sport, I never connected with the game. I never felt that there was really anything to it. It felt like just a computer. GT7 has, in many ways, its heart in the right place. There are missions, there are cool cars, there are great circuits. There are even some returning circuit and event names, clearly showing that they did some background research. Some of the vibe does suit the older games, but the overall aim of the game is still so clearly about the online aspect, to the detriment of career mode. Polyphony desperately needs to either branch out in scope or allow other people to start helping them, which I believe, or at least I've heard they are trying to do or thinking about doing or something like that. Well, they need to do it more, because clearly the load is becoming too much for them to carry, either by choice or by necessity. If you need help, there's nothing wrong with that. Reach out and get the help. But totally changing the game's focus to alienate an entire generation of us who grew up with the games and are still more than willing to pay any kind of stupid price to buy every game that comes out because we love it, just for the sake of bringing in a younger generation who know nothing else apart from paying to win because that's what they've been raised on. Well, I'm sorry, but that's simply a bad marketing decision, because those kids are going to grow up and they're going to stop caring, because that's the way entertainment is now. Things are designed to be disposable. Nothing about any, really, fandom today is designed to engender a long-term fandom. It's all take your hit and leave and move on to something new. That's not how things used to be, even as recently as 10, 15 years ago. And it's just a very short-sighted business plan. You'll earn a ton of very quick money, and then you'll earn a lot less later on, because people will realise, oh, actually, this is garbage. You're just releasing the same thing over and over, so we don't care anymore. And the amount of time that people play the game will reduce, the amount of microtransactions they make will reduce, the amount of people actually playing updates in GT7 has already reduced. The amount of people I see in comments saying that they only come back to the game if they see a car that looks interesting, because the game just doesn't do it for them anymore. And I don't blame them at all. If I were not making YouTube content about it, I probably wouldn't play Gran Turismo 7 at all, apart from the updates. That's sad. That's not something to be proud of. That's not something to be happy about. That really is a shame. And the franchise and the fandom deserve more. So I'm going to continue playing it, of course, because as I said, it's my job at the end of the day, or at least part of it. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with what they do. It doesn't mean you can sit back and say, no, sure, Polyphony, keep doing what you're doing, we're all happy, because we simply aren't. But that's it for my take. And as I said, I'd love to hear yours down below. So get some conversations going. Maybe if you think I'm wrong, point out how. Doubtless many people will. And even additional points, because obviously I focused in on the one. But get your thoughts. Things that you think were good, things you think were bad. Maybe even a mix of both. It's perfectly fine to, as I did in this video, both compliment and criticise. But that's it for my 6-month review, I guess, in effect, for Gran Turismo 7. And here's looking forward to the future of the game and to the franchise with some hope, but realistically measured expectations at best. But until next time, I'll see you then with more. And of course, for now, as always, thanks for watching.